Okay, so in a capitalist society, those who accumulate wealth will naturally use that wealth to influence elections. Of course, this wealth has been obtained through plundering the surplus value, rent, etc., from the working members of society. The extracted value is then turned back upon society in various forms and directed at our hearts and minds in order to influence our decision making. The advertising, speeches, etc., performed by these campaigns serve to legitimize the importance of the choice between candidates and contribute to the overall perception of legitimacy given to bourgeois elections. Click. As is visible on the graph on the left, massive campaign spending has been a part of US elections for some time now. The left graph only displays presidential campaign spending. The one on the right shows spending for all parts of the 2020 election, including House and Senate candidates, and demonstrates how 2020 is an unprecedented high in campaign spending, reaching $11 billion now. Click. Currently, the FEC limits donations to campaigns, technically $2.8 or $5,000 per individual per year, depending on who you donate to. That doesn't really matter, because if you go to Biden's website right now, you can donate up to $721,000 to the Biden Victory Fund, a PAC which simply allocates your money to a number of national and local Democrat Party organizations across the US. By spreading things out this way, the donation limit in practice is 144 times as large. The DNC started doing this when Biden won the primary, as they do with candidates who their party endorses. But this is actually far from the true limit on donations. Super PACs, as well as carries, aka hybrid PACs, allow unlimited money to be raised and spent for political purposes. Super PACs, which became legal in 2010, are organizations technically unaffiliated with a particular campaign, even though they all clearly exist only to support a campaign, disparage another campaign, or both. Hybrid PACs, made legal in 2012, are like super PACs, but even more overpowered because even though they don't quote unquote cooperate with a particular campaign, they are given money to campaigns. They are able to give money to campaigns like a normal PAC. Both super and hybrid PACs are still periodically required to disclose their donors to the FEC, even though these donors are often dark money corporations and front groups. What do campaigns spend their money on? Mostly media. You can do your own research here to find out the details of campaign spending, social media versus TV ads, etc. But generally speaking, the entire purpose of campaign spending is to send memorable messages to reach our hearts and minds. Click. This is the trackable presidential race money, which is 3.7 billion of the 11 billion that is represented by total election spending. Mike Bloomberg, a Democratic primary election dropout, is the top spender of the 2020 election, raising about $1.12 billion. Over $1 billion of this raising total comes from self-funding donations from Mike Bloomberg to Mike Bloomberg 2020 Inc. These over 2,000 transactions range from 50 cents to $250,000. Joe Biden, the current Democratic presidential runner, raised $952 million overall. $584 million was donated to the Biden Victory Fund, a PAC which allows for individual donations of up to $721,000 using the allocation technique described earlier, of which $115 million went to operating expenditure, turning $586 million in donations into $379 million for his campaign. Also among these donation disclosures, there's AFL-CIO, Facebook, Bank of America, and Viacom. Donald Trump, the incumbent Republican, has 601 million raised. With 606 million received in individual donations, the PAC Trump Make America Great Again committee took a $379 million operating expense and only donated $228 million to Trump's campaign. However, much of these operating expenses went to the fund WinRed, the recently made Republican donation platform. The Trump Victory PAC managed to give $202 million to his campaign, paying out both to the RNC and the Donald Trump Committee. Keep in mind that both within Biden and Trump's campaign, these individual donations range from $1 to several $100,000. Tom Steyer, a self-funded Democrat like Bloomberg, received $317 million of the $352 million spent on his campaign from himself. Bernie Sanders received 202 million of his 218 million from individual donors. Click. There are a few others on this list, but I'm just going to point out that Dan Berman is a very epic libertarian who raised $50 million and still lost to Joe Jorgensen in the Libertarian primary, and you should look at his hat. Absolutely majestic. Click. Biden's campaign is about half outside money with $450 million in PAC spending. While mostly comprised of dark money that is connected to individual large donors, some donor groups are Alphabet, the owner of Google, Google, the IBEW Union, Comcast, AT&T, Apple, Microsoft, Lockheed Martin, Planned Parenthood, DreamWorks, UFCW Union, Teamsters Union, Airbnb, and Wendy's. Trump's campaign is also full of outside money with $263 million in PAC spending. Some corporate donors include Uline, the UFC, the New York Jets, Penteco Oil, ExxonMobil, Raytheon, Bank of America, and there's many others. PACs may frustratingly bend the rules by allowing larger donations than intended and by allowing corporate donations, but they really only serve to make an uneven playing field even less level. PACs are not the reason why our elections are corrupted. They are just a result of corporate influence that continues to break down barriers between private interests and government. Click. So why spend? Well, our minds use various approximations of reality that have risen through evolution in order to understand our world. The term for such an approximation is a heuristic. These methods of understanding are not scientific or mathematical. They emerge through trial and error, and this is why we are manipulable. One such heuristic is the availability heuristic. The availability heuristic is a cognitive heuristic through which the frequency or probability of an event is judged by the number of instances of it that can readily be brought to mind. How can this be applied to politics? Well, assuming this heuristic accurately describes human decision-making, each candidate's goal must be to maximize the number of positive memories about themselves and negative memories about the competitor, etc., that you will remember when deciding who to vote for. So this begs the question, does money win? Click. Yes, it does win. Usually over 80% of House members and senators who raise more money also win. How is this to be explained? If you are not controlled by that which you see in advertising, then you must have magically constructed your electoral preferences to perfectly match those of private companies. We want to believe that we are not simply information receptacles that when exposed to more information such as advertising will begin to believe one thing or another. But how else is this to be explained? If we are truly smarter than that, it's time to prove it. The older we are, the more decades of propaganda have accrued in our minds. Will we be able to shake off this influence, or is it too painful to abandon the lockstep of being completely dominated by external political interests? Click. The campaign spending that I have looked at does not account for the promotion of one campaign or another by large organizations such as news media, which are also very expensive ways of spreading political influence. It does not account for social media algorithmic biases, which may actually exist considering that Facebook donated to the Democratic presidential campaign and vice versa. There is more to political cooperation than just money changing hands. It is true that we are already thinking about $11 billion worth of political influence, but depending on your definition of campaign spending, you could multiply it. Click. We should not see campaign spending on its own, but as part of a larger machine which has many more functions, a totality wherein private interests and government work towards the same goals with thin lines drawn between. This is the inevitable result of the evolution of capitalism, wherein the gravity that brings big private money towards public campaigns will eventually crush the barriers built between these two things. Under capitalism, corruption is the main condition and anti-corruption is imposed upon it, with separations between flows of money, which are now no more than ceremonial. People like Bernie Sanders have condemned the level of corruption, but the direct coupling between our governmental and private institutions has created an oligopoly that sees a re-separation between these things as a direct threat to its existence. If eliminating corruption has become a direct threat to our government, it is clear that the only solution is to smash this machine and build a new one. We need to create a government without private money, one in which the magnetism between private money and government interests never exists to begin with. This is called socialism. By eliminating the contradiction between private and public interests, which is fleshed out fully in the contradiction between classes of society, workers and owners, bourgeois and proletariat, socialism can eliminate the corruption from the electoral process. By rising up and abolishing private property, we destroy the cycle of money privately extracted from the working class, which is then turned back against us in all number of forms. These include propaganda, the racist police and prison system, and the military, among other things. We pay for all of it, which unifies the both taxation and extraction of labor value into two methods of achieving different interests of the same body. The only way to end this sickening corruption of the state is to smash it once and for all and to institute a system where money is not extracted from workers for these purposes. That system is called socialism, and it's the next step for our society, whose decaying capitalist paradigm is the source of all of our mindless consumer pleasures and the source of our instability and suffering. It is time for workers to take the wheel of society in order to end the madness and ensure our continued existence.